We don't even care about the drugs. What we want from you is your black book. Your black book of all your clientele that used to come to your parties. We know that you had a lot of elected officials, police officers, U.S. Marshals. I have a guy that used to come that's now a judge. Wow. I mean, I had all kinds of people that were considered elected officials that they wanted to target. I was like, well, I will never give you the black book. And they're like, all right, tough guy, we know that your son is going to be born next month. If you want to see your son born, you'll work with us. I was like, well, looks like I'm not going to see my son born. It's unfortunate, but you are. Bounce back, ain't got a moment. When they see you down, there's no they love it.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Bounce Back Podcast. I'm your host, B. Luke. Thanks again for joining me. I got a special guest with me today. Why don't you tell the people your name, where you're from, and why you wanted to come up here and tell your story?
My name is Matthew West. I'm from Cambridge, the coast. And I actually wanted to come up here and share my story because I think it's good to know how the federal government works and just different situations that people might encounter. And I want them to just be aware of different things that go on.
You say you're from Cambridge, Mass. Why don't you tell the people what part of Cambridge you're from and what it was like growing up out there?
I'm from the coast, which is down towards the river. That's what they consider the coast. I grew up in a middle-class household, grew up with a sister in the house with me, and my mother and my father, and my parents got divorced when I was like 14.
What's that like for a 14-year-old, man?
Mother, she did the best she can trying to raise me, but I was kind of like the man of the household. My father was still involved, very much involved in my life, but growing up and having to, listen to my mother, I was hard-headed and I kind of tried to do what I want, but, it was just a struggle. But, we got through it. I made sure I went to school. That was the one thing they asked. But, I was in the streets, with, hanging around, doing things that I shouldn't have been doing, being a typical teenager.
What kind of things were you doing when you said you were getting in a little bit of trouble at that age?
We were hanging around a little street gang in Cambridge. We was robbing stores for clothing, alcohol. Then we would fight with different other kids from different parts of Cambridge and fight people from Boston. And we would just, we used to just love to fight, my crew. We just would, get into all that stuff that we shouldn't have been doing,
At that age, does it lead to any trouble with the law or trouble at school?
I didn't get in too much trouble in school. I mean, I played sports. So, I try to do one thing right, and that was to get an education. But as far as leading up to the police, there was a couple of times I was arrested. I had a shoplifting charge, assault and batteries on police officers, different things like that. But nothing that was too extreme that it would put me in prison. I was just on the cusp of staying out of trouble, not to go to prison, You
want to talk a little bit about that assault on the police officer, because it's not always what people think when they hear assault. They just make it seem like, a cop got beat up or something like that.
Right.
It could be just a resisting. Mm-hmm. What was that story like?
Basically, it was just a resisting arrest. A couple of buddies went into the store. We all went into the store, actually. Grabbed some liquor, ran. We all ran. I hid in a bulkhead. The police came. When the police came out, I tried to get away. Mm-hmm. And in the process of getting away, they said that I pushed the officer. That led to me having an assault and battery on a police officer. And they didn't charge me with shoplifting because I actually didn't take nothing that time.
And was this a juvenile charge?
Yes, it was a juvenile charge. I think I was 16 at the time.
What came of that? Probation?
I just got probation, suspended sentence. Mm-hmm. I had to go up to see my probation officer at the Cambridge courthouse at the time, mm-hmm. on Thorndike Street. And it was nothing that would deter me from getting in trouble again, because it was so simple, just going up there every Tuesday and sitting in the lobby doing absolutely nothing.
You had mentioned, and you put an emphasis on education. Did you finish high school? Where did you graduate from?
Yes,
if you did?
I graduated from Cambridge and Latin. I graduated in '88. I went to college after that. I went to Virginia State University and HBCU, and I left Cambridge and I left everybody, but I just wanted to try something different. Mm-hmm. And college was a good experience, but unfortunately I got in trouble at school. I brought some of my old shenanigans at school and got caught hustling at school.
Wow.
And I ended up getting in trouble. I ended up getting 10 years. And in Virginia, you only do 18 months off of 10 years, and you can see the parole board. But because of my juvenile cases, I was turned down for parole all the way up until 4 years, 8 months, and then they finally let me go. But to max it out, I only would have had to do 5 years off of that 10. So I ended up getting out and coming back to Massachusetts.
Now, it doesn't seem like when you go to a college, there's probably not like that mentality or that street mentality we may have grew up on. You don't talk to administration or cops or anything like that. How did that all unfold where you end up catching the case? Did you have somebody telling on you or what?
Yeah, I had some of the local guys selling drugs for me, and one of them got caught. He was an older guy. He ended up getting caught, and he said, you know, I'll get you who I get my drugs from, and introduced me to some lady that was actually a cop, and I sold her a couple of ounces, and then I had a warrant out for my arrest. And then one day they tried to get me. I eluded them. Somehow I got back on the train from Virginia to Massachusetts and found out through Crime Solvers on TV that I was wanted in Virginia for distribution of cocaine. So then I just waited a little while, and I ended up turning myself in right after the new year. I think it was January 27th of 1992.
So talk about that Crime Stoppers thing. Were you just randomly watching TV?
No, actually, I wasn't, but somebody else was, and contacted my father and told my father and my mother that your son was basically on TV and he's wanted in Virginia, but they called me by an alias name, but they knew my full name as well.
Did your parents already know that you were on the run? Did you break it down to them when you came back, or?
Yeah,
were you
I
hiding it
actually
from them?
did break it down to them. I kind of explained to them what was going on. They were just telling me, you know, what kind of life you're going to have living on the run. You need to go fix that situation.
Absolutely. And then eventually they see this, they get the call or whatever it was that you're on Crime Stoppers. Do they have a conversation with you after? And like, what's the next move?
I didn't really know too much about everything that I did. I just knew that I was wanted for distribution of cocaine, and I was hustling at the time, so I didn't know any of the details whatsoever until I got to Virginia. They were just like, you know, basically go handle it, see what you got to do, and see, you know, turn yourself in and do the right thing. Maybe they'll give you a break instead of them sending the marshals out here to come get you and bring you back there. So that's why I decided.
That's what you
to do
did.
that.
You went back to Virginia,
Yeah.
turned yourself in.
Yep.
Talk about like that day. What happens? Do they let you out? Do you get another court date?
Actually, I went back, and my girlfriend at the time was still in college, and I spent a few days with her, and there was one officer that had it out for me so bad that, you know, I kind of stayed out of the local area where I knew I was wanted. I went to the next county, which would be Chesterfield County, and I went to the movie. I'll never forget it. I went and seen Hand That Rocks the Cradle at the time. It just came out. So we're sitting there, out of all people in the world, the officer that had it out for me sat directly in front of me with his girlfriend.
Wow.
I could not believe it. So I just played like I was kissing my girlfriend at the time, and we just got up and left the movie theater. And then that next day is when she dropped me off in front of the Petersburg Police Department. I went and turned myself in.
Okay. And then they do they hold you there? Do they bring you right to court that day?
Everything's connected.
It's all okay.
Yeah, everything is connected. The court and the jail is all one place.
So you saw the judge that day?
Saw the judge that day, turned myself in, sat in the county jail for 6 months. I just pled guilty. You know, I wasn't even thinking at that time. I was like, 22 years old? I was like, whatever. They told me what I did. They told me what they had on me. I was just like, all right. And people listening to people in the prison, or in the jail, I should say, oh, you'll be fine. This is your first time being in prison. They're not gonna, you know, the time's different out here. You know, don't worry about it. And I pled guilty, and they ended up giving me 10 years. And like I said, you ended up doing 18 months. I'm thinking I'm gonna get out the first time, but because I had priors in my juvenile, that didn't happen.
What was that like being from out of state?
Well, that was definitely different because, one, I was a light-skinned dude with light eyes. A lot of dudes in there, you know, kind of, you know, thought I was soft. You know, they didn't know me, but it had its problems. But one thing about, I used to love to fight, so it was never like I was scared. I was just outnumbered. But anytime anything was ready to go down, I was, I was young and wild. So I didn't, I had no fear.
Yeah.
And it was just an experience. But, I had my scuffs in there, but nothing. I was never in any danger. I never got hurt. And I did what I needed to do.
Did any of that lead to whole time?
They didn't bring me to the hole. They just brought me on a different floor, which would be a different part of Petersburg that didn't get along with these guys on the second floor, which was another different part of Petersburg. So they kind of separated them. They got their areas, like Cambridge got the port, the coast, and North Cambridge and East Cambridge. So they just separated, and them guys would never merge together. So they just put me downstairs with them guys, and I ended up, no problems down there whatsoever.
What would you say is the biggest difference between like Virginia guys and Massachusetts guys growing up out here?
Down south, they're very close. They're close knit. There's a lot of people had relatives and cousins. This is my brother, my father. I mean, they were very close and they stuck together. They didn't know too much about Northerners back then. You know what I'm saying? The way I talked was different compared to them. They said, like, you speak too proper or whatever, and it's like, well, that's just how I was. You know what I'm saying? It's hard to explain when that's how you were born and taught how to talk. But I don't think there's really much difference other than like I said, they don't know too much about up north guys.
They just talk a little different.
Yeah.
There's different lingo. I can see that.
Definitely.
Now, sitting in county waiting trial, is there any programs that they let you get into?
No, actually it was overcrowded, and the cell block had 8 cells, and then there was 8 of us on the floor outside the cells. So there was 16 of us, and there was only a few places to eat. You had only so much room to lay on your mat. So basically we played cards all day, dice all day, watched TV. I never watched the daggone soap operas. I mean, it was one TV. There was no rec yard.
Wow.
It was just really, it was a hard time, meaning just being uncomfortable, very uncomfortable. And that was how I got one of my scuffs was I didn't know any better. But, there's only a few tables. They fed me my food. I sat at the table like, you can't sit here. I was like, I can sit where I want to sit. I'm in prison. I'm not moving. They're like, yo, you can't sit here. I was like, I'm not moving. Then later on that night when the lights were getting ready to go off, they were, they all had their shoes on. I kind of knew something was kind of fishy. And they're like, yo, we're going to respect you. But you got to call the CO and tell the CO you got to get out of here. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm outnumbered. One of them tried to grab me, and I just grabbed him, threw him into the rest of the guys, and stood at the door. And each one that came up on me, I just hit him and did what I needed to do. And even the CO was like, you all let this fucking Northerner come down here and do this to you all. Y'all are soft. And I went down and I was like, look, it's not a scratch. They tried to jump me. And then that's when they moved me downstairs.
Was it like a racial thing? Like, oh, this is the white table? Or was
No.
it just a...
Believe it or not, no. It was just they felt like they outnumbered because they were more cliquey in there. There was like 5, 6 of them that kind of ran the cell block because they've been there. But, I just felt like, I'm going to eat where I want. I'm in prison. I'm not sitting down on my mattress.
Right.
And it just became a problem.
And so you was on one of the mattresses on the
On
overflow.
the floor. Yeah, on the floor, on the overflow, yeah.
So for people that don't know, you're sitting out there completely vulnerable to
Completely,
whatever.
yeah.
You're not even from there. And they always say, too, innocent until proven guilty.
Right.
Do you feel like you were treated like you were innocent when you were sitting in there?
No, not in Virginia. Virginia, they kind of treated you like you were guilty. They didn't treat you too right in there. I believe that the correctional officers, they just didn't care. They had, they had not a worry in the world. Like there was, you really, it was just you couldn't complain to nobody. I mean, you don't get out your cell unless you get a visit. Other than that, it was just being locked in that block all day. So pill line comes, you can't explain to the lady that's serving the medication. She ain't gonna do nothing. But yeah, I do felt like it was, you were treated a certain way.
You ever have any personal issues with staff there?
I had no problems at all with staff at the Petersburg jail, yeah.
Did you end up going to the hole for that?
Nope, they just move you to a new cell block.
Okay.
That's it. They didn't promote the hole too much there. And if I'm not mistaken, I don't even know if there was a hole, 'cause it was more So like a holdover for everybody waiting to go to trial or waiting to get moved to their next destination once you get your sentence.
And what was the name of this county jail in Virginia?
It was Petersburg.
That was the name of it?
Yeah.
Okay. So when you take the plea bargain, like, yeah, the way it's set up, it's like you could be out in 18 months if all goes well, but
Right.
it's still a 10-year sentence.
It's still a 10-year sentence.
I mean, how's that feel taking that?
I was young. I didn't even think about it like that. I was like, whatever. I had the whatever attitude at that time. Like, all right, 10 years. I was automatically focused on, all right, 10 years. I ain't been in prison before. I'll get out in 18 months. But then when I kept going up for parole and they kept turning me down, I'm like, damn. You know, their excuse was that I didn't have no respect for the law. And they looked at the assault and batteries and the other little skirmishes I got into when I was in my younger years.
So you get sentenced. Is this a thing where you go to a completely different facility or just a different block on the same unit?
No, you go to a completely different facility in a different part of Virginia.
Now, is this what considered a state prison? Doing
Yes.
so much time? And
Yeah.
what was the name of that place too? Just
I went to Southampton for about a month, and that's where you get classified. So you're in there with people that are doing double life, 10 years, 5 years, whatever. But you go there, and that's when they break it down on where you should go to your next destination.
how do they determine where you're going?
Your criminal history. They
Is
look
it
at
like
your-
a point system?
No, no point system, but basically they look at what you've done in your life, pretty much break it down from nuts to bolts, because then I believe where you're from, because certain people that are from different parts of Virginia can't be with other guys from Virginia. They do a complete breakdown on where your destination would be. And I didn't care at that point because I'm already in Virginia, so I didn't have family there, so it didn't matter where they sent me.
So when you get to that new spot, what's the first thing you notice as far as differences and then similarities too?
And I ended up going to, I believe it was Indian Creek, they call it. There was a rec yard, we could play basketball, the weights are outside, so there was a lot more to do. And it was just a totally different situation than being in the county. I was just so happy to be out of the county jail, it didn't even matter. You know?
Is this considered like like how do they do security wise? Maximum? Do they do level
Medium,
fours?
level, medium, high, and super high. It depends on how much time you got too, because most guys there had probably 20 and under, thinking that they were going to make parole and stuff like that. And there was a canteen line. We could actually smoke back then, so guys would gamble for cigarettes, packs of cigarettes, and it was just a lot better than where I was at that time if I'm comparing the two.
You already got in a fight over sitting somewhere. How does that work now in the new spot?
You basically just have to watch and learn, and and it was completely different because everybody was from different parts of Virginia. You could be from Petersburg, then they got the Tidewater area, that would be down in Hampton Beach area, and then you have Northern Virginianers, and it was all clicked up kind of like that, what part of Virginia and who you knew, and that's how everybody ran in their circles. And most people like myself, me being from Boston, there wasn't a lot of guys from Boston, but we would hang with mainly the New York guys, and us would kind of have our own little clique. But I didn't click up. I played a lot of basketball, so the people that I dealt with were on the basketball court, and that's how I developed my friendships and people that I met in there.
Gang presence, is that something you noticed there?
Yeah, there was definitely some gang presence, but it wasn't as bad as it would be at other places that I've heard at that time, because they didn't run like that. Everybody was young and they were wild. There wasn't a lot of fights. I mean, there was fights, but not like I thought it would be. Consider it's a big open area and everybody can move as you want to move when it's time to make a move.
Is it similar to like how when you were in county, maybe they only send these gang members here, these ones here, so that they're not together?
Maybe that's how it was, but like I said, I wasn't too familiar with the gang affiliation in Virginia because that wasn't my lifestyle. So I know that certain people had certain tattoos and they were from the Tidewater area and they considered themselves whatever they wanted to call themselves. I didn't really encounter any issues whatsoever with gang issues, yeah.
So by the time you get to this place, you already have your county time, and then you have your month or so in classification.
Right.
How much longer until you see the parole board, and what happens?
See him in 6 months, and I got the answer in like 3 months, and then they turn me down. Then you see him every year, no matter what. If I went up in June to see the parole board, and they didn't give me my answer till September or October. It doesn't matter. I'm going back up in June again just to make sure that I get that every year you get to see them.
So the first time you went in front of the parole board, were you able to go there with like program certificates and things like that?
Yes.
What kind of programs were you doing?
I did bricklaying and I did sheet metal.
Oh, okay.
And but the bricklaying is something that I enjoy doing. And you could do programs. You could bring all this. This is what I've done. Different classes that you might have taken, and you present that to them, and they look at it or they don't. I don't really know because you don't actually go to the parole board there. You know what I'm saying? It's not like you're gonna go see the 5 people that is on a panel and they're gonna ask you questions. No,
so they make a decision without even personally getting in front of them and seeing them, not even on camera.
Not even on camera or anything.
So literally they're just looking at a piece of paper, and
that's it.
This is why I'm trying to do this thing, because it's deeper than that. We're not just a piece of paper. At least out here you would have been able to go in front of people. They would have had to feel your presence. You could have spoke to them. They could have caught your tone. They could, they say 80%, 90% of communication is nonverbal. They could have caught all of that, but they didn't get even
nothing. You could have wrote a letter. The most you could have did was write a letter. Yeah, you can write a letter and they can read the letter, and then you can send it along with whatever certificate you have.
I want to talk about the bricklaying in the sheet metal. I mean, do you think it's important to learn a skill in there if you can, and why?
Yeah, absolutely, it's important because most young guys, we don't know any trades, or they didn't know any trades at the time. They knew the streets. So I felt like it was important to pick up something, considering I was in there, I wasn't in college anymore, so I was like, damn, let me pick up a trade. I've done construction because my father has a construction company, so I've done it in my younger years. I'm pretty crafty with my hands, but overall I think it's very important that guys do something to try to make their lives more productive when they do get released.
Where does all this take place? Do they have shops over there?
They had carpentry shops, bricklaying shop. You could go to food, like baking shops, different culinary things. Yeah, they definitely try to do a lot for you while you're in there,
Are you working in there? Do you get a job there?
Yeah, everybody has to work. Either you're working cleaning bathrooms, you're working in the kitchen, you're working cutting grass. It didn't matter. As long as you had a job. I believe I was wiping tables in the dining hall at that point.
You feel like staying busy like that
helps?
Does that help with the time?
Absolutely. When you stay busy, you're not thinking as much. You're out of the way. And then, when you have to work, after they serve breakfast or whatever, you go to the gym, you work out, and then you might play some basketball or softball at night or football, depending on what you like. And your day goes right by. You jump in the shower, you might watch a show, then, your day's over with.
What other kind of things were you doing with your time?
I would work out and I would play basketball. That was really it. And I might have wrote some letters here and there. But other than that, in the bricklaying, of course, but that was only for a few hours. That's really all I did. I didn't really do too much other than that, yeah.
Playing basketball or handball, anything like that. Those moments and then the time is flying. Those are the moments where I probably felt like the freest in there. Do you ever have any moments where you kind of felt like that?
Absolutely. When I was on the basketball court, I used to love it so much that, it was just a stress reliever. I mean, if it rained and we got to go in the gym, because they did have a gym, that was just felt so good, like they didn't take that away from us. And that was important to me because that was what I enjoyed doing at the time,
Did they have any pull-up bars on the units or anything
No,
like that?
It was one weight pit, and it was outside, and it didn't matter. It was cold, winter. We were out there in our jeans and our jacket, and we were just out there getting in, no inside weight rooms, but all outside.
So you get denied that first parole. What's your mindset like after that? You thinking, all right, we're going to get him next time?
That's it. We're going to get him next time. And what kept me going is like they would take 3 or 4 months. I'm like, damn, I see him again in a few months. So, all right, I'll get it next time. So it went by pretty quick, but I guess that fact that you could possibly make parole, keeping that hope alive.
What happens that next time you see the parole board?
Same thing. Basically, they just said that I had no respect for the law and no respect for other people's welfare. I'll never forget the what they actually wrote. That's why I know it verbatim. And I just took it on the chin again. I'm like, damn, you know, the only thing I could think of is that all the stuff that I did in my younger years is just basically catching up to me. I'm like, whatever, you know, we'll try it again.
Are you a little more discouraged this time, or?
Very discouraged, yeah. At some point I started having the I don't care attitude because I'm like, my philosophy was, damn, I ain't never been locked up before. Why are you all going to make me sit in here? I've been doing everything I'm supposed to do, and you're not going to, you know, give me any play on parole.
So how long did that attitude last? Because that could be self-destructive too.
Yeah.
That I don't care attitude. Or was that just like a fleeting thought here and there?
It was just a thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a thought. I didn't act out on it at all. I mean, basically, I still kept my same regiment and, you know, worked out and played basketball. And, you know, there was a lot of people in there that I got to know over the time. So we would eat big gumbos at night and we would just make the best of it, you know.
And you pretty much staying on the same unit this whole time?
Yeah, staying on the same unit, yep.
Do you eventually get a parole? What happens?
I end up getting one at 4 years, 8 months. I paroled back to Petersburg, and I met my parole officer, and I told him that I wanted to go back to Massachusetts. I didn't have any family here. He's like, well, why did you get paroled here? I was like, because I wanted to get out quicker. You would have had to wait for the transfer if I wanted to get paroled right back to Massachusetts. So he's like, I'll give you 72 hours to get back to Massachusetts. He's like, you get out of this state and don't come back.
Did you make it to Massachusetts in the 72 hours?
I sure did. Took the train, ended up getting there very last minute. And I got paroled to my father's house in Chestnut Hill. And I remember the parole officer coming there, and, you know, first time I'm experiencing, he coming there with his gun, wanting to see the house and so on and so forth. I'm saying to myself, I only have a few months. He's like, I don't even know why they got you on parole. You get off in a few months, you know, just basically keep your nose clean and you'll be all right. And I was like, cool.
And that's what you did?
And that's what I did. And I actually probably seen him one other time after that, and that was it.
These new skills, you're doing the bricklaying, you're doing the sheet metal, is that something that you
actually
had put to use?
I did put it to use a few different times, but that wasn't what I actually put to use. I ended up going back to work for my father's construction company, and I was doing construction, and then I ended up getting a job at a company called Unico, and I was a building mechanic, and it was a sweet job. I had my own van, my own gas card, and I was servicing commercial buildings all over Boston and Cambridge, wherever they had an account.
Oh, nice. And what happened with that job?
Well, what happened with that job was I ended up getting in trouble. I'm going to rewind a little bit here.
Absolutely.
I ended up, after I left my father's house, I ended up building a loft in, him and I built a loft in Charlestown, and I was living there. And money, doing the construction, I was making a little bit of money. I wasn't making the money, and I was trying to think of a hustle that I could do. So I tried the after-hour thing in there because I lived on the 7th floor. There was only one elevator to get up. I could lock the elevator and not allow people in or whatever. So I tried the after-hour situation. But I didn't like staying up late like that. So they stayed up the whole weekend. I was like, oh, I can't do this. And it was, so I did that twice. Then I tried a dice game. And I was just thinking of different things, because I wasn't going to hustle again. Yeah. I refused to pick up a package because my philosophy is, if you hustle, you have to deal with somebody. And I didn't trust nobody after the first encounter getting caught in Virginia. So I refused to hustle. So I ended up building a stage, 10-foot by 10-foot stage in my house. And I said, you know what? I'm going to host stripper events. And so I went out, try to recruit a few strippers, and it was all right. I invited a whole bunch of people and passed out cards, business cards with the address. People would come up there, and I'd have a bar set up, and people would come up there and have a good time. I'd have like 4 or 5 strippers at first, and then I ended up meeting somebody that had strippers as well, and her and I became business partners, and she ended up being the mother of my son. And she wasn't a stripper, but she had the girls. And so her and I, we used to host events once a month, and we would sell alcohol, and the girls would dance on the stage, and I used to have chairs just like that with wheels on them all around the stage, and I would have like 30, 40 people up there and had the music blast, and people would have a good time, and it was a good event. And No trouble whatsoever.
Now, was this all legit on paper? Was there certain permits you got to pull? Or what?
No, it wasn't legit on paper. The only thing that I was doing wrong would be selling alcohol because I didn't have an alcohol license. But it was just hosting a party and charging at the door and selling alcohol. But the alcohol would be the only thing that
Did
really
that end up catching up to you, the selling alcohol without?
No, it didn't. It didn't
Okay.
end up catching up to me. I ended up moving to California probably after being there probably a year and a half. I just met some other girl that I met before my son's mother, and I had promised her that I'd come move to California with her, and I ended up moving to California with her, but I stayed there like 2 months, and it just didn't work out because I was into my son's mother more than I would be her. And so I ended up coming back to Massachusetts. I left my loft, so I didn't have my loft no more. So I ended up moving in with her, and her and I continued the business. We ended up finding different locations, different, like a studio like this. We rent chairs, set up 50 chairs in a big circle, and we would set up a bar, and we would, invite people to these events, and we would also do private parties. Like if somebody got matched, a bachelor party, a birthday party, we would bring the girls and stuff like that. So we were doing this for years. And we ended up renting a place in Hyde Park at 24 Factory Street from a police officer who had a studio like this, and we paid him $600 for rent, and we would rent it once a month and invite our friends. In that process of renting his place from him, he was involved. He was a Boston police officer. He was involved in things that her and I, one, had nothing to do with, and nor did we know that he was doing certain things. And he was under investigation. He ended up introducing me to a friend of his who he considered his best friend that lived in Florida that just came back to town. His name was Troy Lozano, and said, "This is my best friend, let him come up to your parties, just treat him well, Matthew." And I trusted this guy, this officer, because he and I were doing business for almost 8-9 months, and I never had no problem giving the rent. He would come up there in his uniform. Other cops would come up there in their uniforms. I had a lot of different high-profile clientele that used to come up there because they used to have a good time. I didn't allow, it was all 30 and over. I didn't allow no young riffraff. I had security. I had a bar set up. I had different girls working, passing out change. So we had a well-oiled machine. It was running perfectly. There was parking out front. Everything was going good. Now, he introduced me to his friend, which his name is Troy, as I said, and Troy would come up to the events, walk around, look around, and he would check out the place and be like, "Wow, this is nice." He would, get dances or whatever. But come to find out, in November of 2005, he came up to me and was like, "Hey, yo, can you get me some party favors?" I said, "Party favors?" I was like, "With the girls?" Because that's all I did. He's like, "Nah, the other party favors." And he hit his nose like that. I was like, "Oh, I don't even hustle." I was like, "Them days are over." I got in trouble in Virginia. I was like, "The officer that I rented from doesn't even know this, but, I don't hustle. I don't do none of that." He's like, "Word?" And he's like, "Yeah." He's like, "I know you know somebody." I was like, I really don't. I don't even mess around like that." Then a month later, he asked me again. He's like, "Yo, you can't get me, you can't get me a couple 8 balls?" I was like, "Listen, I'll give my buddy a call." I ended up getting him 2 8 balls. As time went on, another couple weeks, he had some Home Depot gift cards where you buy 50 cents on the dollar. And I was buying some Home Depot cards from him. So I was like, "Man, this guy's, he's all right. I do construction. I can always use these. This is a hookup." I knew that they were illegal. However they got them, but I knew it wasn't legit. And so December of 2005, he's like, "Yo, you think you can get me 4 more of those?" And I remember just having an attitude like, breathing heavy. And I say that because he was actually wearing a recording the whole time. And I was like, "Yo, I'll give my buddy a call, but I don't even do this. All this is on recording." He's like, "Bet." I ended up getting him 4 more 8 balls, and a total of 17.8 grams of powder cocaine. August of 2006. 6, the feds came to my house. And I had just bought a house in Saugus at this point. And they were like, could we come in or whatever? And we got you on tape selling drugs to our corroborating witness. The first thing that came to my head was I said, who, Troy Lozano? They looked at each other like, how the fuck does he know this guy's name? Because that's the only motherfucking sale I made. That's how I know his name. So they like, well, we don't even care about the drugs. What we want from you is your black book. Your black book of all your clientele that used to come to your parties. We know that you had a lot of elected officials, police officers, U.S. Marshals. I have a guy that used to come that's now a judge. Wow. I mean, I had all kinds of people that were considered elected officials that they wanted to target. They were like, we want your black book and we would like you to wear a wire and set these people up to see if they would further break the law. Since they were willing to go to your underground place, they might be further willing to do more. I said, for one, my parties weren't illegal. They was like, yeah, but those type of people weren't supposed to be mingling with drug dealers and thugs that were going to your party. I was like, well, I will never give you the black book. And they're like, all right, tough guy, we know that your son is going to be born next month. If you want to see your son born, you'll work with us. I was like, well, looks like I'm not going to see my son born. It's unfortunate, but you are going to leave my house. So they ended up going back to the courthouse to attempt to get an indictment. They gathered together the grand jury. They presented the case in front of the grand jury. The grand jury almost didn't indict me because the grand jury was like, well, you have this corroborating witness who's willing to do anything for you, and you ask him to get drugs from this West guy who wasn't even selling drugs until you all asked him to go get the drugs. So they seen it because they seen they listened to the recording because I tell them on the recording that I don't sell drugs, not knowing that he had the recording in his hat.
Wow.
So then they went back to deliberate whether or not they were going to indict, and then they came back out and like, so you don't know about any other drug dealers Mr. West has? And they were like, nope, we just asked you to base your decision off of the information that we have here. And they went back to deliberate again. And then they're like, so out of the clear blue sky, I'm saying it, I all have it in this paper too. It's just, I remember it because I read it so much when I was down, but they were like, out of the clear blue sky, you're investing this police officer and you got your corroborating witness, go ask him for drugs, and you don't know about any other drug dealings that this guy West is doing other than your sales that you guys asked him to get. They're like, no, but we will tell you this. Mr. West did get caught for selling drugs in Virginia, and they gave him the year it was back in 1992. And we ask you not to base your decision off of that alone, just the evidence that we presented you today, not what he did in the past. They went back out, came back out, and they indicted me because he kind of, led them there. So
seems like the whole thing was like a case of entrapment. What happens? You get served like a federal subpoena?
No,
how does that work?
The feds came to my house, surrounded my house, banged on the door. My girlfriend at the time ended up letting them in. They came upstairs, grabbed me up, brought me to the federal building downtown Boston, fingerprinted me, and when I was
real quick though, what's the scene at your house? You said they came to your house. Are they rolling deep?
Like, they rolled deep. They rolled deep. They had rifles, whatever they had. They surrounded it. There was like 5 cars out front and SUVs and whatever other cars that they drive, and it was definitely kind of like, what the hell, you know what I'm saying? All this for this, you know what I'm saying to myself?
Non-violent crime?
Yeah. But, because I've had priors, they were kind of, I guess, afraid or, being prepared. After that, they ended up taking me to the precinct, and then I'll never forget it. In the elevator going up to the federal floor where they do all the fingerprinting, they told me to face the wall in the elevator, like turn around and face the wall. I was like, this isn't high school. I'm not facing the wall. And they tried to grab me, and I stood my ground like, nah, you only turning me around to face the wall in an elevator. Anyway, I ended up going upstairs, getting fingerprinted, went to the federal building, the Moakley building, brought me in front of the judge. The judge told me that I couldn't get any bond. They went and told the judge that I was combative, and the combative part was because I didn't want to turn and face the wall in the elevator.
Wow.
And so he was like, you know what, no bond whatsoever. And I was like, cool, it is what it is. I basically sat in there till, my next preliminary hearing that they have. And
So you said you sat where? You didn't just sit in the courthouse. They bring you to Plymouth? Where did they
yes,
hold you?
I was actually in Plymouth. I sat in Plymouth, and Plymouth was, it was what it was. I knew people there.
Be one thing, at least you're in the state of
Yeah, I'm in the
Massachusetts
state
now.
of
At least you might know
Yeah.
somebody. Did they have you in the 2-man cells?
I was actually in a pod with a whole bunch. It was a big block upstairs. But I was in a 2-man cell,
Two-man
but they
cell.
opened the cells up, and it's a whole bunch of blocks
Yeah.
in there. So yeah, I was up in there, and I knew some people, so it was cool. So I ended up retaining a lawyer.
At any point was getting a bail like somewhat of a reality, or what?
No, it was. I figured I'd try it again, so I asked my lawyer to resubmit the paperwork and see if I can get a bail. I didn't know why I was a flight risk. I wasn't going anywhere, But they considered it the high profile case that I could not get bail.
So
No.
you go into federal court. Is that like a once a month?
No, it's not once a month. It's whenever your date is. So you
okay.
could sit up in there for a while because my lawyer's gathering all his information from the case, and the U.S. attorney's, probably still figuring out things from my case. And so I sat up there for a while, put in for a speedy trial. My lawyer wanted to put in for a speedy trial because he's just like, this is a bunch of, this is clear case of entrapment is what he sold me the whole time. Like, you're on tape telling them that you don't sell drugs. You got the drugs. They baited you in with some gift cards. You felt comfortable with this guy. So you ended up getting him a couple more 8 balls. You got him from somebody. They know you got him from somebody because you said on the tape, I'll give my buddy a call. So it was just really making me feel comfortable with him so I could feel, vice versa, you know. And I was like, all right, I had to trust his call on all this. So he was like, don't even bother getting bail. At this point, once I tried the second time, he was like, let's just ride it out and we're going to go to trial. I was like, cool. And everybody was telling me don't go to trial in the feds because they give you football numbers if you lose.
And they have a pretty high conviction rate
Correct.
from what I remember hearing.
Correct. But the only plea bargain they offered me was to cooperate. And I wasn't doing that. So
ain't
there
right.
was no, if you plead guilty, we'll give you 5 or we'll give you 10 years. The only plea, like, either cooperate or go to trial.
Wow, feds don't play around.
No, they don't play around. And I wasn't cooperating. And I wasn't going to just plead guilty and then take whatever they were going to give me, you know what I'm saying? And plus I was adamant because I knew I didn't sell no drugs at the time, but I was adamant on like, nah, this is entrapment, especially reading, the law up there and doing your own research. You're like, yo, this is me all the way, you know what I'm saying? I was stuck. And so I ended up going to trial, but 2 months before trial, my lawyer told me, you know what, we're not going to use entrapment. We're going to say that you gave them marijuana because they missed the hand-to-hand transaction. But the reason why they missed it, because I never handed them anything. I was just so, I shouldn't say scared, but I was just so aware and didn't trust nobody. Every time that I got him something, the 2 times I got him something, I just threw it on the windowsill and was like, it's over there.
Right, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because I just didn't, from the case in Virginia, I just knew not to trust nobody. The hustle game, you got to deal with somebody. And even though dude said he was cool, my gut instinct just told me, I don't do that,
How confident were you that day of trial? Especially now he's trying to switch it up and
I wasn't
not go with
confident.
the entrapment thing where it's
Yeah.
like, you're like, nah, I didn't. Like, you must know in your head, like, I didn't give him weed. Why are we lying when we have the truth right here and it's clear? What did he try to tell? Is it like tough to prove entrapment?
That's
like,
what he said. It's tough to prove entrapment because you had the prize. It's going to give the jury a reason to maybe he did do it. Maybe he was doing it again. But I'm like, I say on tape that I don't. Doesn't that account for anything? He's like, trust me, let's just use this because they never actually seen you give them a hand-to-hand. And the cooperating witness, Troy, he had got caught buying guns in a gun store in Virginia. He told them, I'll go back to Massachusetts and get you a dirty cop, which was his best friend, that the cop that I rented it from. And so he was setting his best friend up. I was just caught up in the situation.
Okay.
So Troy, you know, he went on the stand and he actually testified. So
Wow.
he was in this for the long haul, and they were paying him and everything, and he was a true cooperating rat, you know, that worked for the government.
What ended up happening with that cop that was under investigation?
Him and two of his other buddies, they ended up getting caught up in a big drug smuggling operation. Troy told them that he had some cousins from Florida that needed some drugs escorted off the Mass Pike. So him and the two other cop friends escorted, supposedly it was a 18 wheeler full of drugs, and they were all going to get a certain amount of money, and they never looked in the truck, so there might have not have been no drugs. I don't know what that's, you know, what that entailed, but they ended up doing it. And then they told the other cop, you know, come to Florida to get your money. They went out to Florida to get their money. The three of them, or two of them, if I'm not mistaken, the whole time they were dealing with an undercover agent that was sitting there like, yeah, I'm going to pay you, you know, just playing it to the T. And the feds just jumped right out on them, and they got arrested.
And they ended up getting time.
They all ended up getting time. 20. One of them cooperated and got like 18
big surprise
years.
there.
Yeah, one got 20. The one that I dealt with didn't cooperate, didn't do none of that. He ended up getting 20. I think it was 27 years, and they ended up letting him out because of COVID, what was going on with COVID, and he's out now doing very well.
Wow.
And
So bring it back to that day of trial. Do you feel like a lamb being led out to slaughter at this point?
I didn't feel confident. I felt like something wasn't right. I just felt like, you know, trapment was my only defense. I'm up here saying that I didn't give him nothing, but you got me on the lingo talking about, yeah, you need, you know, 8 ball or 2 balls, I think I said on tape. And, you know, people aren't stupid. You know what I'm saying? I just think it was like I just didn't like the idea, but I trusted him, and he told me, he was like, listen, if this defense doesn't work, I will write you an affidavit saying that you disagree with my defense, and you can try to take it back to trial.
Did he do that? Did he write the affidavit? 'Cause
He wrote the affidavit, but when I got my response from my federal judge, the federal judge said, you can't argue what defense your lawyer selected.
wow.
So,
Okay.
got
So
thrown out.
you blow trial. Is that what happens? Is that immediately the diesel therapy? You get on the bus that day to go.
So there's a scale system, and I was only facing 12 to 18 months for that amount of drugs in the feds. But because I had the prior assault and battery when I was 20 and the Virginia drug conviction, with those 3, they considered me a career offender. Wow. So now my max is 24 years. Oof. Damn, 24 years. I'm like, that's my max, you know. You know, he can't go under 15. And so, you know, and my lawyer's like, listen, I'm going to try to go to the state court. I'm going to get you a misdemeanor. I'm going to see if I'll get your misdemeanor assault and battery case vacated. He goes to the state court. The judge sat on the case. I got the case out of Roxbury, but she sat in Quincy, so he had to go in front of her in Quincy because that was the judge that was in charge of the case at the time. And he went in there and was like, you know, Mr. West is getting ready to get, you know, he's getting ready to face sentencing. He's got this misdemeanor assault and battery. I asked that you vacate it. She's like, well, did he get his plea colloquy read right? And she's like, I don't think so, Your Honor. It's not in here. And she's like, you know what? Tell him Merry Christmas. I'm going to vacate it in the best interest of justice.
Wow.
She vacated the case. He comes to me the next day. He's like, the case is vacated. You're only facing 12 to 18 months. He's like, but we need to get in, you know, I'm going back to the next day to get sentenced. So we go in to get sentenced. And he gave the U.S. attorney the memorandum showing that the case was vacated, gave it to the judge. The judge was like, you know, there's some new revelations here. Mr. West got the case vacated. He's no longer facing career offender. do you have any problem with this, Mr. McNeil, who's the U.S. attorney that was presiding over my case? He's like, yes, I do. I don't understand how he got this vacated. Can I ask for a recess? He's like, whoa, I don't normally give recesses on, so you can go investigate. It's a separate sovereignty, so you can go look into this case. He's like, but I will give you 1 day. The U.S. attorney, along with some marshals, ended up going to the Quincy District Court and making a big stink and telling them, we want to see the paperwork, we want to see the recording of how this happened. Wow. 2 weeks later, they put pressure on the state court judge in the newspaper, and said that and just said that she was giving cons Christmas presents. Wow. And put the pressure on her. She ended up reversing her own decision. Wow. And saying, I was sick the day I made the decision. I was suffering from lethargia, chest pain, and nausea. So instead of approving Mr. West's vacate, I'm going to reverse my decision and put it back on his record. The next day I go to court, I ended up, the U.S. attorney wanted 24 years. The judge said, I'm not giving him this man 20, that's like a life sentence to him. But I will give him 15 years with 10 years supervised release. I was like, damn. My lawyer told me, don't make no expression. But you ever sit down, your knees buckle? Right. You're sitting down, they buckle. And I was like, damn, this is crazy.
That's 15 years to serve plus the 10 years?
Afterwards.
Wow.
Yep.
So you finally get on that bus, and then what happens?
Finally get on the bus.
Diesel therapy, they call it. Where did they send you?
Yeah, at first I went to...
Talk to the people about diesel therapy, too.
Yeah,
man.
it's just a long bus ride with a box on your arm, sitting on a bus with a whole bunch of different inmates, and on your way to Rhode Island for 3 nights, New York. Then from New York, I went to Lewisburg. Then from Lewisburg, I went to Loretto. So it's just a long process.
So where do you finally end up, man?
I end up finding Loretto. That was my final destination.
What state is that?
That's in Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I ended up in Loretto, and I remember just being angry at the world, because I was like, yo, I got screwed. I'm saying to myself, like, I can't believe it. I'm saying to myself that they're going to come back and be like, all right, we can't give you the 15 years. I'm thinking that this judge was wrong. How do you just change your mind? I didn't think she had the permission to change her mind. My thoughts are all over the place. I ended up going to see my counselor there. He's like, well, you need to take a drug program. I was like, man, I ain't taking nothing. I was angry as hell. And I was like, I'm not taking nothing. I'm not doing nothing. I was like, yo, as a matter of fact, I'm out of here. And I went back to my cell. He ended up calling me back 2 weeks later. He was like, yo, I read over your case. He's like, I'm going to try to get you back to Massachusetts. He's like, all I ask you to do, get a job, stay here for 18 months, and I'll get you back closer to your family so you can do time. He's like, by the way, you got screwed. And he's like, you're a better man than me. He's like, why didn't you just cooperate? You wouldn't even be here. I was like, because I'm not living like that. That's not how I operate. Really. Yeah, I'm not bringing down other people for a mistake that I made. Because at the end of the day, I could have told Troy no. You know what I'm saying? I could have said, I don't know nobody. But where I grew up, somebody knows somebody all the time, and I thought I was just doing them a favor, basically, and it ended up catching up with me.
Sure did. So you're at Loretto. Is that
Loretto?
Loretto. That's an FCI?
Yes.
And how does that work? Do you got somebody from Boston come up to you, or they ask you where you're from and talk about, because I know the Fed's a little bit different.
Yeah, the Boston car came up to me, and they already knew what was going on because they followed it in the newspapers because it was a high profile case, so they followed it, and they were like, yo, this is crazy. I can't believe it. And, somebody there that I knew I didn't hustle. Like, yo, when I heard that they caught you for hustling, I was like, yo, this dude doesn't even hustle no more. He's got strippers. What the hell's really going on? So they didn't understand it. A lot of people that were close to me that knew me. But the Boston car, they took care of me, set me up, and it was cool.
So a lot of times people think the feds, they think it's, salad bars and playing softball. It gets a misconception. It's not really like that, though. It pops off during the feds.
It pops off in the feds. Yeah, it definitely can. That place was actually not as bad.
I mean, it's not a USP, but still,
Right.
I mean, I'm sure
Oh
they
yeah.
still pop off.
Oh yeah, there was, you had the Bloods, the Crips, and you had, Detroit. Everybody's from all over the United States.
DC,
Yeah,
I'm sure.
DC, a lot of DC guys, Pennsylvania guys. I mean, we had people from California, but we all had our own interpretation of people that came that far,
Right.
you know.
Yeah, okay, I got what you're saying. Yeah. What's the numbers game like looking like? Boston, is it like a real low numbers compared to other places? Boston's a smaller city.
Yeah, it was compared to like New York, but it didn't matter whether you were black or white. It was like everybody stuck together. You know what I'm saying? It doesn't matter if you were a mob guy and you were from Boston, you were from Boston, you were from Boston, you represent 038. That's just what it was.
I mean, you ever see anybody getting shanked up there or anything like that?
No, I seen a lot of people get checked in because, believe it or not, they try to, pedophiles were in there as well. So dudes used to check in the pedophiles, like you can't even live here,
Right.
and there was a lot of that. But there was a few altercations, but it wasn't nothing like, tell you the truth, the most blood I seen was in Plymouth. You know what I'm saying? Not for nothing, but the Cape Verdeans, they were going at each other hard in there. And it was just all over street stuff.
Yep.
But they were young and wild, so that's where I seen the most at.
Yeah,
but,
Plymouth pops
yeah.
up for sure. I was there for a few months. Yeah.
So But
So
yeah.
did the caseworker end up being true to their word?
Very true to his word. I ended up doing the 18 months there, and then I had to go on diesel therapy again back to Massachusetts, and I ended up going to Devon's.
Okay.
Yep. And
Now, is this a low at this point? Or was
this
still
is the camp. I ended up going to camp because I was under 10 years.
Okay.
Because off of 15 years, you do 12 years, 8 months. I ended up doing between the trial and to get to my next destination, I was just under 10 years by the time everything transpired.
Okay.
So I ended up going to the camp, and I was, meanwhile, back at Loretto, I was the head chef there, so I'd been cooking for a while.
Okay.
And that was, that was therapeutic to me at the time. I ended up getting the job, and I let, a couple old heads that showed me the ropes, and one thing led to another, and I just ended up running the kitchens there. And then when I went to Devon's, I ran the kitchens there, and that's just what I did.
And you stayed in Devon's for the rest of your time?
No,
Okay.
I didn't stay in Devon's the rest of my time. I ended up going to you can do a drug program, and you can get a year off your sentence. So I ended up going back to Lewisburg. I stayed there, and I did the drug program. It's just getting up and going through programs and sitting through classes and different things, and you couldn't lay in your bed all day. You had to work, and you had to do certain things to meet the requirements in order to be able to to get that that year off your sentence.
And you completed that program, no issues?
Completed that program, no issues whatsoever. And
Do you stay now after you complete that program? Do you stay at Lewisburg, or do they send you back out to camp? Or?
I could have gone back to Devon's, but I just left right from Lewisburg. I ended up doing my time, and the day came, and it was time to go.
So how much time did you do at Lewisburg?
It probably ended up doing like 17, 18 months. I did the program, and then I had to stay around after I completed the program, waiting for my date to leave.
And then you leave. When you leave, is it a parole thing?
Parole, yep.
Okay.
I ended up getting paroled, and I ended up going to Huntington Ave, where the federal parole house is at. I ended up sitting in there for like 3 months, and then I got paroled to my house where I lived at.
How confident were you this time with the parole?
Um,
Were you kind of learning at this point not to get your hopes up, hope for the best, but expect the worst? Or what's your mindset going into it this time?
I was, I didn't, you listen to other people's stories, so they tell you, you should do this, you should do that. But, my first parole officer, he was a straight shooter. He came up there, he told me what he wanted out of me, basically just to keep a job and to, stay out of trouble, and, give him a urine analysis every so often when they ask for it.
So for the kids who might not know and out there running the streets and maybe getting into trouble, we got to give it to them raw and real. What's the worst part about prison, federal, whatever? Why don't you give them the worst part about it to you?
The worst part about it to me was you miss time that you'll never get back with your family. I lost my mother while I was in there. I lost my sister while I was in there, and they never let me go to no services whatsoever. And
What's that like, losing loved ones like that in there, man?
it's deep because you don't have anybody to really talk to. You mean you have people to talk to, but talk to as far as it know your parent or know your sibling. You know what I'm saying? So, and it's also not realistic because you're not actually at the funeral, so it's hard to grasp it. You know what I'm saying? Being like it would have probably hurt a lot more being firsthand, being at the funeral and at the services. But because I didn't get to say goodbye like that, it was hard to really face it until I really got out and realized they weren't here.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, damn, when I went in, they were here. Now that I'm not, and now that I'm out, they're gone. And, those were the two people that I grew up in my household with who are no longer here. And, that's the hardest part because things can happen. Tomorrow's not promised to nobody.
Exactly.
And people got to realize, they play for keeps. The federal I can speak for, they play for keeps. They're giving out football numbers. They do not care. That's just what it is. If you do something and it's that something is enough, you're gonna sit around a while.
Yeah, and you sat a while, and that's a lot of time to reflect. So talk to me about something you might have learned about yourself doing all that
Patience.
time.
I have patience now. I didn't have patience before. Now I have a lot of patience. I can sit back and I can just, I take things in and I don't really react like I used to react. I'll just analyze things first because one, I know there's a repercussion behind it if I do anything crazy, you know what I'm saying? At the end of the day, they have the saying as the feds, they left the light on for you, you know what I'm saying? Your number's still the same. If I decide I want to do something, my number will stick with me. So I react and I don't really revolve myself around people that are in that lifestyle anymore because it's not worth it for me to get in trouble behind somebody else's shenanigans. You know what I'm saying? If I'm going to do something, it's going to be on my own. And I can't say I learned the lesson as far as drugs because I learned my lesson from my first bid in Virginia that you can't trust nobody. That's why I never picked up and never, sold anything again. I had already learned, but you just can't trust nobody. That's the other thing. You can't trust nobody in the game. In the game, in the streets, you gotta run with somebody, you gotta sell to somebody. And you don't know if that person's gonna be able to hold water like you might be able. That might be your home road dog, but things change when they start yelling them football numbers, and people fold under pressure and they'll give up their mother, some people, like, all right, anything not to do take responsibility and do your own time. I didn't have to do a day. I could have went right home and said, here's all these people, here's the black book, and you know what? I don't care nothing about them, but I had to take responsibility for what I did because at the end of the day, it's about choices. And I had a choice to say to this dude, no, I don't do it. No, I don't know nobody. Don't ask me again, But being in that lifestyle, people do smoke weed, people do certain things. And I figured, he was all right. Yeah. He wasn't all right.
So you bring that up about trust on the outside, but when you're in there, you got to roll with some people. Do you ever trust anybody 100%?
No.
Behind those walls, and why not?
Because you don't know. Some people that you met behind the wall, you're just meeting them. You don't know what a person's, thinking or what another person might be going through. And it's unfortunate because I met some good people. Some people you just don't know. In any given situation, you just can't trust what another person's going to do. And I consider that in life. Even just, certain people, I know what I'm going to do. I can't tell what another person's going to do. So you kind of have to stay at arm's length and you don't let everybody know everything. And I live by that today. Even to this day, I don't let everybody know everything. It's just unfortunate. You can't.
Yep. What message would you have for, say, like a young man or an older kid, older teenager, kind of running the streets on the, dancing that line where they might end up in prison or end up in jail or something like that? What kind of message would you have for them?
I would tell them, appreciate what you got because, when you do lose your freedom, you don't respect it until you lose it. A lot of people
don't even know you have it.
Right.
Most people, they take it for granted. That people don't even realize they're free.
That's right. You really don't. And I respect my freedom now. No, I'm not perfect, but I don't think I would put myself in a position like I did back in 2005 when I first picked up this case.
So you did, 12 years before you got out of the feds?
11, 8, because I ended up getting the year off.
Okay.
So it was supposed to be 12/8, but
What's
I did
the-
like 11/8 or something like that.
What's the biggest adjustment when you hit the street, or was it not really that bad because you did the whole step down to like a halfway house and all that talk?
But I was fortunate. When I was at Devon's, I was in this program where we went out and we spoke to colleges, and we used to tell our story to people in criminal justice system or just little kids, and I would always tell my story, and I was able to get out maybe once every 2 months whenever we would be able to go to school. So that really helped me a little bit, and I had a lot of, I like to consider I had the right support system. I had friends that would come up. My college roommate came up every 2 weeks. My father would show up. So, my girlfriend at the time would show up. My son would show up. My son's mother would make sure that my son came up and seen me. So I was still connected in there. So to me, it made my transition a lot easier when I got out because I had a good support system. I had a job lined up, and I had good people supporting me.
What advice would you give to somebody making that transition and knowing what you know now?
I would tell them, to the right connections on the outside, and you never know what somebody might be able to help you. Somebody might be able to pull strings and get you a job, and and try to humble yourself, because at the end of the day, life is real funny. You know what I'm saying? And you got to do what you got to do. What's gonna work for you, because no one's gonna look out after you better than you.
Facts.
Yep.
So you've been out now. Talk a little bit about what you got going on since you've been out. I mean, do you got a relationship with your son that was born when you first were going away?
Yeah.
How old is he now? And just talk a little bit about that. What you got going on? And
he lives with me now. My son lives with me. Him and I live together. He's 17. I got out. He was like 11 years old. So him and I got a good relationship, and you know what? He got to see me through the process, so he knows who I am. So him and I've talked, and it's very good. I mean, he's a typical teenager, but he's a good kid, and he's nothing like I was when I was young, and that's the best part about it. And I got 2 other little kids, and of course I have a older daughter as well that just got married. She's 26, and she lives in Virginia now. She just got through traveling the world to Thailand, Dubai, and South Africa. And she got married. So she's
amazing.
My kids and everybody's doing good, and I'm happy about that.
Okay. How you making a living these days?
I actually do construction. I do construction with my father. He's still in business after 55 years, and it's not bad. And I'm also a chef, so I'm a certified chef. I got my degree when I was in Devon, so I'm certified, and I'm eventually going to be getting a food truck, and it's just really the process. Everything's taking its place right now, and it's going to happen. It's just how bad do I want it?
What are you learning about the process? How
It's
deep
not
are you
easy.
into it? Yeah.
It's not as easy as I thought. There's a lot of politics behind a lot of different things, but you know what? If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. If it's not, it's not. It's not going to stop me. I'm good with my hands. So as long as you got a skill or some type of craft, people are always got to eat, and people are always going to need things built or fixed.
Absolutely. That's amazing. I appreciate you coming through, man. You got a great story. We touched on a lot, man. If there's anything you wanted to add that you came here, you wanted to talk about that we might have missed, or just anything you want to, some last words to close things up, or if you want to talk about what you got in here in the binder. Here's your chance to do so.
All right, I appreciate it. Now, just some newspaper articles, some sentencing transcripts, just, because a lot of people can talk whatever they want to talk,
Right.
but, in the feds, it's all about your paperwork.
Yeah.
And I brought it here not knowing, but if there was something that you wanted to look for to verify yourself, because, people can, misjudge things or whatever. I got all of my stuff. My story to people is, it doesn't really matter, if you're not in the game. But all it takes is one slip up for you to do somebody else a favor, not knowing that they got caught up into something. And you know what? Now you're caught up into something, and you're in a position, either you take it on the chin, or you cooperate and you live with your life on your head on the swivel, because people do cooperate and they turn government, agents, whatever you want to call them, but there's no way that that's a good way to live when your head is always on the swivel worrying about the people you told on. So take responsibility for yours if that's the lifestyle you're gonna live. If you're in the game, you got to do what you got to do, but just be careful on how you do it.
I mean, my thing is, it's not even like about some BS street code. This is like, as a man, like accountability
Right.
for your actions.
Exactly.
People get, whatever the situation may be, it could be at work.
Yep.
People's first, this one does, you know what I mean? Like, and that's not really, I don't think that's the way to go about things. When you mess up, you own up to it and you take the consequences that come from it.
Yep.
You learn from it. It is what it is. What's next is on us, and that's how I feel about that.
Yeah.
It's deeper than like people think, oh, this tough guy street code. It's not about that. It's about being a man.
That's it. And you worded it right. It's about being a man and just take accountability, And my father, he would have never, he would have supported me, but he would have been like, what are you doing? You bringing down all these people? Because no, that's not how I raised you. And he's nothing street at all.
Right.
But he raised you to take responsibility for what you do.
It's just like, that's more that old school man anyway.
Yeah.
Like my grandfather, same way. He wasn't like a criminal, but it was the morals,
Yeah.
the code, the integrity. And speaking of integrity, man, what's integrity to you?
Taking responsibility, being who you say you're going to be. Don't sell these dreams to people and be who you are, Take whatever it is that you got to take and do what you got to do, Stop pawning it off on other people and stop, blaming other people. Shit happens, you deal with it, and you know what? Life goes on, you know what I'm saying?
That's it. And hopefully people don't make a big enough mistake or poor judgment where it costs you your life, one way or another. You know what I mean? You could be sitting doing life and being buried alive, or you could actually physically be buried in the graveyard. We all go in there at one point, so we got to make the most of it while we're here. Bro, I appreciate you coming through.
Yeah,
guys, it is what it's.
I appreciate you having me, man. You're doing a good job putting all this stuff out there, and I
Thanks for
you,
saying
man.
that,
Yeah.
man. Thanks for saying that, though. Like I said, I appreciate you coming through.
Yeah.
Guys,
got
it
it.
is what it is. What's next is what you make it. I'm B. Luke,
Matt West.
and we out of here. Peace.
Bounce back, ain't got a moment when they see you down this